Years before Resident Evil introduced the masses to survival horror, there was Alone in the Dark. Inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and released in 1992, the first game was a hit with both critics and horror-starved gamers looking to get lost in a spooky mansion. In honor of THQ Nordic acquiring the rights to the series, I wanted to spend a few minutes looking back at the 26-year-old original. Turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're going to spoil the story and ending for Alone in the Dark. This is Game Over, the early years. This is the story of Derceto, a mansion so scary that even ghosts run away from it in fear. But our hero, Edward Carnby, isn't afraid. He laughs in the face of fear and considers a haunted mansion to be a paid vacation. Actually, I think I'm a little too high energy to properly introduce Edward. This is how the man himself sets up the events of Alone in the Dark.
On my door, a dull brass plate says, Private Detective. The few friends I have call me Carnby. The others call me the Reptile. I don't care to think what my banker calls me. These days, I leave my letters unopened. Bills and threats to send in the receivers just ruin my day. When an antique dealer called Gloria Allen contacted me, I slipped into my best shirt, holstered my .38, and got to her shop as fast as I could. I was expecting something sordid. Blackmail, probably. Boy, was I wrong. What I was asked to do was visit a property called Derceto and find a piano in the loft. It was an old piano with secret drawers. The kind people who buy stuff in antique stores go crazy over. The Derceto house is supposed to be piled high with classy junk. Furniture, books, paintings. It looked like whoever owned Derceto was about to get cleaned out. I was going to bring up the subject of money when Gloria Allen handed me $150 and a key. I kept myself from grinning at the thought of my banker's surprise. He doesn't like his victims getting away. I looked over a copy of the police report. The former owner of Derceto, a guy called J. Hartwood, had hanged himself in the loft. The coroner concluded it was a clear-cut case of suicide. I promised Gloria Allen I'd give the place a look over. My report will be ready in a couple of days. I've been reading up on the history of the old house. It's the kind of place ghosts run away from in terror. Grisly murders, curses, lunacy. Luckily, devil worship makes me smile. So, this is my idea of a paid vacation.
Don't let the bravado fool you, because Edward Carnby was not ready for the events of Derceto. He figured that his job would be little more than tracking down the old piano and to investigate the mysterious death of Jeremy Hartwood. You know, the kind of thing a private investigator could do in his sleep. But our bored-sounding hero quickly learns that he's gonna need to take this case seriously. First, he's attacked by the Walking Dead, and then he reads a letter narrated by a voice actor who clearly understands what kind of game he's in.
They are coming! I have freed hellish forces, and now the price must be paid. Derceto is the prey of evil. The sun has set. They will find my body, but will not have my soul. I can imagine the master's fury and the terror in the hearts of his slaves. I hear their footsteps. Some may understand what I have done. May God forgive me. Farewell, Jeremy Hartwood.
So, when he's not actively punching the undead, Edward spends most of his time exploring each room for items that he can pick up and use to find even better items. This will bring him face to face with a ghost in the music room, a rabbit-like monster in the bedroom, and even a haunted painting. And then it's back to the grind of finding items and solving simple puzzles, neither of which advances the story in any meaningful way, unfortunately. So, after spending most of the night picking up objects and fighting monsters, Edward eventually finds the stairs leading down to an underground cavern system. This spits us out near the water, where somebody has created a pathway and pillars to jump on. Our unlikely hero is forced to use skills he never knew he had in order to navigate around the flying demons and solve the maze without getting wet. There's even a part where he's all but blind, only able to see a tiny bit of what's directly in front of him. This is not what he signed up for. Okay, so Edward makes his way to this legitimately creepy tree. Just look at that thing, it has an old dead guy fused with it. Anyway, Carnby doesn't have time to be grossed out, so he sets the tree on fire and sees the whole thing burn. This triggers an earthquake, so Edward races out the way he came. Back through the maze, back over the water, and back through the caves. This is his only chance of escaping, so he's walking as fast as his little body will go. Now that he's destroyed the tree and figured out the mysteries of Derceto, Edward is eager to leave the house and spend that money. The demons are gone, the doors are unlocked, and he's finally free to leave the mansion. Here's what happens next. It's probably worth mentioning that Alone in the Dark has a second playable character, a woman named Emily Hartwood. She's Jeremy's niece and unconvinced that her uncle committed suicide. Her adventure plays out pretty much exactly the same way, and that even goes for the ending. I think you can see that her celebration is a little different, but everything else, including that big twist, is identical. She would later show up in Part 3 in Illumination, but that's a story for a different Game Over episode. Now, in the case of the first Alone in the Dark game, I think the ending is a little weak. I suppose that also goes for the rest of the story, which starts out with some hilariously bad voice acting and then just shuts up. There are a lot of spooky characters in Derceto Manor, but not enough story beats. The twist ending is almost cute when compared to the horror landscape we saw just a few years later. Also, for a game called Alone in the Dark, there's really only one time where you're actually alone in the dark. But I guess that isn't the point. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, The Early Years. If you liked what you saw, then you should know that we post new episodes every Monday. So here's the question I have for you. Is Alone in the Dark worth bringing back? I know that THQ Nordic recently acquired the rights to the series, but let's be honest. That probably means they're just gonna remaster that crappy reboot from a few years ago. Should they start over from scratch? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, I'm currently hard at work on a bunch of reviews, including Call of Cthulhu and Siberian, the Time-Traveling Warrior. I'm also prepping a new mailbag episode for Friday. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.